Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome back to Speaker's Corner, the Al-Emaan Centre series of live talks. We are now halfway through Ramadan and pray that your fasting is going well and that you are keeping healthy in this lockdown period, inshallah. We have been blessed with some truly outstanding scholars on our platform, and tonight we'll be hearing part 2 of Dr. Mahera Ruby's talk on maintaining family ties, parenting and the youth. Before we introduce our guests, I'd like to encourage you all to post any questions on the Q&A or chat functions, which are located on the lower center of your screen. These will be answered after the talk, along with any questions from our live YouTube stream, where a recording will be available later on. Dr. Mahera Ruby is currently a teaching fellow at UCL, having completed her PhD at Goldsmiths, University of London in the Department of Education in 2015. Mahera is a personal development, parenting and youth coach. She set up Blooming Parenting in 2012 with the vision to reshape and strengthen families and communities. Through facilitating bespoke parenting courses, Mahera supports parents to nurture their children, and youth to blossom into the gifts that they truly are. The youth courses challenges the young people to explore and reflect on who they are and who they want to be, and the legacies they want to leave behind. Mahera has authored many publications. She has co-authored her first book, Interconnecting Worlds, Teach Partnerships for Bilingual Learning, and her latest book, Family Jigsaws, Grandmothers as the Missing Piece Shaping Bilingual Children Learner Identities, has been published by the IOE Press. Mahera is a community organizer. She was the chair of Muslimat UK and is currently a director trustee at Markfield Institute of Higher Education and East London Mosque trustee. Mahera is involved in many interfaith projects and activities. She is an executive member of Tower Hamlet Citizens. So with that said, it's an absolute pleasure to introduce once again Dr. Mahera Ruby. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Ruby.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That was a very long introduction to a very short talk, so I hope I can do justice to the time that we have together. So, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. ربي زدني علما. ربي يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير. Assalamu alaikum everybody, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me to this wonderful platform. So today's my second appearance in a way in Ramadan, and in Ramadan. So the first part we looked at maintaining family ties between parents and grandparents, of us and our own parents. So in a way, we being the children, how do we maintain relationships with our own parents as a modeling feature to show, not just for show, but also fulfill our duty as children, and how we earn our Jannah through that process. So today I'll be sharing a bit about how do we actually maintain our relationships with our children. And often we hear, well, in my line of work, I always see disaffected young people, but also parents who are very, very troubled. They lose sleep, they are not able to eat. There's a lot of anxiety, worry. In the best functioning families, alhamdulillah, you'll still get parents who are worrying about the future of their children. And one of the things that I remember mentioning in our last session is that actually one thing we probably need to ponder on is, are we raising our children for today, or are we raising our children for tomorrow? And that's where the anxiety comes, because we want to be able to control the tomorrow, control what's in the future. And because we're not able to, so many things are unknown, it creates anxiety in us as parents, which obviously, if you can imagine logically, creates anxiety in our children as well, because they're not quite sure where they fit in. Today, something happened, tomorrow it changes, and then the day after, again, the rules are changing constantly. So one of the things I wanted to ask you to think about is actually when we think about our child, whether they're young children or teenagers, we're always going through phases of wanting to know our children better. So one of the questions I tend to ask parents is, I wish I knew how to. What is it that we really know how to? What is it that we want to know about our child? What is it that we feel are lacking in ourselves as a parent. So even in the last few days, the parents I've come across, they're really worry about the lack of skills that they have. They think they're not good enough parents. And I think today we have in the audience, we have parents and children, possibly some young children, some teenagers listening in. And I want to be able to do justice to people who have joined, that actually parenting is a cycle. And today we are the parents tomorrow, and today we are raising the parents of tomorrow. So again, the young people in the room, it's a two-way relationship, and I don't want to come across that parents have to do all the hard work and they burn the candle at both ends, and at the end they still feel alone in the relationship they have with their children. They feel their children do not respect them. They feel hard done by their children. The ingratitude sometimes we see from our children is really heartbreaking. So what is it that creates this disconnect between parents and children? So one, although I've got the question here, generally the response I get to this is, I wish I knew what my child is thinking. I wish I knew how to understand them better. I wish I knew what was going through their mind. I wish I knew why they choose the friends that they choose. So it's all of those things that we really want more insight into as parents. And why is it that we don't have it? Because, you know, I've got a couple of quotes here. One from Imam Ghazali, that moral acts are a sign of the inner will. So we're all trying as parents. I absolutely empathize with every parent that this is a craving in us, that we want to create the moral child. We want to raise our children with the moral capacity to choose between right and wrong, make those choices so that they'll be a child of Jannah. They'll be and we can be a family of Jannah. At the same time, we know that in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, every child is created in a state of fitrah. And it is us actually as parents and the culture and society that make that child into a Christian, a Jew, a fire worshipper, or whatever they tend to become. So it's not in a vacuum. A child is not raised in a vacuum. They are raised amidst relationships. When we talk about this fitra is either nurtured or corrupted by relationships that they have around them. So the parents, the cultural relationships, the association they have with particular cultures. Majority of our children, we are growing up in a fusion culture of many cultures, particularly living in the UK and London. And, you know, the more you come toward the city, the more the melting pot it becomes. So again, what we have to appreciate is that actually the child is being pulled in many, many directions. So in order to teach that morality to our children, we need to be very clear where we are at as parents. Where is our moral compass? How do we use our moral compass to make the choices? What kind of a role model are we to our children? What do they see us doing on a daily basis? So if you imagine children looking upwards and observing the adults, what view are they absorbing about the environment around them? So it's really important that we, you know, I find that a lot of parents will shift the blame towards the children after a certain age, and that can start really early. Even a 3-year-old, you know, they're a terror. And we use it in passing as well. My child is terrorizing me. My child is bullying me. My child is making my life hell. My child is making my life really difficult. But on the other end, we also have the joyous moments as well. You know, my child warms my heart. The apple of my eye. So we have this juxtaposition of a relationship where we struggle, but yet we have moments of joy as well, alhamdulillah. So this is what makes life. But actually, is there anything we can do to regulate that space a bit more in order to make this relationship that we have with our children a bit more harmonious in the way we deal with them? So when I've said that before, that our children observe us, most research actually shows that although in our minds we have this image and view that our children spend a lot of time at school, they actually see us most of the time. So their moral compass, their behavior and their worldview is actually developed from home. And even through my own research that I've conducted in schools and with families, time and time again, it's a reoccurring trait that majority of the traits are inherited from the parents. So we again, we need to look at ourselves to be able to assess how our children are. So when you see something that you don't like in your child, in their behavior, in their mannerisms, it's important to actually sit and ponder and think, is there something in me that I need to change? So I'll give you a little example. There was one case that I was dealing with where the child in school used to, even just the mundane things, he used to scream, he used to shout a lot, he would always share what he had using a raised voice. And we just couldn't understand where this child was coming from. And to him, it was very normal. It was very normal for him to do that. It's only when we made a home visit, we realized that everybody talks like that in the home. They're all shouting, they're all screaming. And the reason behind that is because there's an elder in the family who's hard of hearing. So there's a grandparent in the family who's hard of hearing. So in order for him to hear everybody shouting, it's not out of frustration or anger that people are shouting. It's to meet the need of an elder. But what we don't realize is that our children are picking up these traits, which may not be socially appropriate, if that makes sense. So again, the elder that is hard of hearing, is there something we can do to make his life or her life easier by possibly getting hearing aids, possibly getting them to anything that could make their life easier. So again, just to explain that the root of this child raising his voice is situated in the home. So this is just a simple example, but there's many examples like that where when a child is being compared, they will be aggressive, they will be defensive, they will be, we call them the sensitive child. They can't take criticism. They take offense at everything that you say, but it's actually repetitive comparison that is creating that trait in a child. So when we actually look at relationships, I just want you to look at this picture, and I'd love for you to put some comments in. Maybe Brother Ahmed can help me share some of the comments that do come through. So if you look at this picture that I have on the screen, and I was to say to you, this is our society. The box that you see in the middle here, and let me see if I can use a. So if you look at this box here, if I was to say that this is our society, or our schools, what would you say is going on in this picture? So just a couple of minutes, just share your thoughts in the chat, and what does this picture say to you about what's happening to the children going in here and coming out here, and whatever's happening in between? Okay, I'm going to see if I can also get the chat up. So, okay, so someone is saying that there's brainwashing going on. Okay, anything else? I'll be interested to know what's happening here. Who are these people or these children? It's a mechanical process. It's a treadmill. It's a conveyor belt. Yeah. Now, if I was to change this to a family, this box to a family, could this, so made to fit a model? Yeah. So children are being made to fit a model. So they're going in as individuals. They're coming out looking exactly the same. Who do you think these children are? What traits do these children have to be able to come out of this chute here? What kind of labels do we use for children here in society, in our families? Any thoughts? Failures, yep. Troublemakers, rejects, problem child, children with certain disabilities, certain needs, basically children that don't fit the model, they're rejects in society, failed exams, lack of opportunity. So again, it doesn't take much. And if you think about this box as our home, we can still create that in our homes. Not the doctors. Yes. So again, not the doctors and the engineers and our lawyers, if you look at particular contexts. And it's not just within the Asian community, it exists in many other communities as well, this aspiration to be doctors and lawyers and engineers. But here, if you look at this as a family, what does it say about the relationship that we have with our children? It's a dictatorial system here, where you have the father possibly standing here and the mother's probably here. So, we are kind of dictating the rules that are in this house. And when I ask parents, so where are these rules written? We always say that, yes, we've got family rules. Yeah, we have family rules. But when I ask them, where is it written? And I can ask people who've joined the session today, where are your family rules? Where are they written? And for many, many families, actually, the rules are written inside the heads of the parents. Today might be one thing, tomorrow it will change depending on the weather, depending on the content, depending on what's happened the night before. So those rules are actually not written anywhere. Whereas if you go to a classroom, if you go to your workplace, if you go into a lift, there's always instructions there. What happens in an emergency? What happens if you feel unwell? Who do you need to call? There's numbers there. There's an email there. There's something that keeps you feeling safe, right? And wherever we go in society, where there are not rules written, we feel at a loss. We don't really know what to do. People look at each other and they're not quite sure how to function. So again, in our homes, if there are not clear rules written, and they don't have to be many, but they need to be written with your children. They need to be brought together in conjunction, in collaboration with your children, in order to decide what will make your family a happy home. What is it that we need in this family in order to be able to function well, especially now in this difficult time that we're in, and all space seems to be taken. Some of us are privileged with more space than others, but actually we still feel claustrophobic. We don't want to be in each other's faces. We need our own me time. How are you going to get that if you don't negotiate this space? So it's really, really important when we think about this box. Many of our children, and I see this at university, and and it breaks my heart when I see this, that many of our young people who come from practicing families, who come from parents who have tried really, really, really hard to instill the values of our deen into our children, when they get to university, when they get to college, they want to reject that. They feel that they don't identify with it. It doesn't resonate with them. It's because they weren't doing it for themselves. They didn't have a buy-in into this learning that they had, because all this time they were listening to somebody. They were obeying their parents. And obviously in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we should obey our parents. But at the same time, I need to decide as a parent, what does that obedience look like? Because if there's collaboration, there'll be more input from the children, and they will have a sense of an ownership over those rules and this space. So this home needs to be a home for everybody. It's so important that you have this collaborative mentality, that where you talk, there's sense of communication, there's good communication that happens between parents and children. And Ali radiallahu anhu saying that the first 7 years are years of play, the next 7 years are years of teaching, the next 7 years are years of companionship. And there's so much wisdom in this hadith, that or even though some say that it's a weak hadith, but there's so much to learn from this hadith, that first 7 years you're thinking about playing with your child, and majority of us do play with our children. But is there a cutoff for that play? Do we then pick up the stick to teach them from 7 to 14? And many of us, even though we know we may not be picking up a physical stick, we are using the faith as a stick, that if you don't do this, you're committing a sin. If you don't do that, Allah will be angry with you. So they understand the punitive side of our faith. They don't see the love, the mercy, the forgiveness, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so close to us, how forgiving He can be. And children don't understand that sense of forgiveness because we are not able to forgive our children. We find it difficult to forgive a mistake that they make. Once they've made a mistake, we again remind them in future mistakes that they make of the past mistakes they've made. So again, it's about our parenting. Actually, parenting is something that we need to really nurture in us, that parenting, I'm a parent, but parenting is about the child. It's not my story. It's their story that I'm trying to shape. And I have many examples of when a child is talking back to a parent, the parent becomes defensive and says, what do you mean? You don't think I've worked hard, I've done all this and I've done all that. How ungrateful can you be? You're supposed to obey your parents. You're supposed to listen to your parents. So we give we're under attack, and we try to give the defense. In that moment, it's not about us. Parenting isn't about us in that moment. Actually, the child is trying to share with you something about themselves which they're not happy about. So they're trying to convey a feeling to you. They're trying to convey a message to you that they're not happy. So in that moment, it is up to us to connect to them rather than correct them. And that's a really important thing to remember, that when we think about our children, much of this happens because we see our child as an object or to mold. We call our children sponges, we call our children clay, so many different terms are used to describe children, and that we are responsible for molding. In actual fact, our children are molding us. In many ways, our children actually mold us. They express the patience, true sense of patience. They are accommodating. In the research that I've done, the book is published on the role of grandparents. SubhanAllah, the children are so resilient. They have to navigate, if you can imagine, on a daily basis, they have to navigate relationships with at least 5 to 6 adults if they're school going. Now, navigating relationships with adults isn't easy because all those adults will be telling you what to do, how to do it, when to do it, where to sit, where to go. And these children are allowing you to be the teachers, the parents, the coaches, and you're trying to mold them into these obedient beings without any consultation necessarily with them. So what I'm trying to project is this idea that our mindset needs to shift as parents, that when we look at our children, I'm just going to use this hadith as an example, that and I'm going to highlight just a couple of traits that we need to have as parents in order to build a better relationship. Because in the absence of relationships, you're not going to get much change or much of a connection with your child. Because in the absence of a relationship, there's no point in correcting. And the more you try to correct in the absence of a relationship, the greater the distance you'll create between you and your child. So this hadith, Prophet Ibn Abbas reported the Prophet is saying that verily Allah has recorded good and bad deeds and made them, sorry, I can't see, and He made them clear. Whoever intends to perform a good deed but does not do it, then Allah will record it as a complete good deed. If he intends to do it and does so, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Exalted, will record it as 10 good deeds, up to 700 times as much, or even more. If he intends to do a bad deed and does not do it, then Allah will record for him one complete good deed. And if he does it, then Allah will record for him one bad deed, a single bad deed. Now you look at our nature, in how we relate to our children, how forgiving we are, how merciful we are, how compassionate we are, and how we use the benefit of the doubt. How do you use this trait? The benefit of giving your children the benefit of the doubt. If they've come and said, I've prayed, your role is to believe them. And say, Alhamdulillah, that's great. Next time, how about we pray in Jama'ah? Build on it. Yeah, rather than saying, let me check your elbows, let me check your feet, have you actually done wudu, when was the last time you did wudu, how can you pray so fast, did you actually even say Surah Fatiha, did you even remember to say the second surah, how many rak'ah did you do? And we're going to the third, giving them the third degree. So actually what we need to create between us and our children is a sense of trust, which upholds their and honors their dignity that they have, the self-respect. Because when you eat away at a child's character, it digs into them that you don't trust them, you don't believe in them, they don't have the capacity to be good. So if we go back to the previous hadith where we looked at, we've seen that the children are born with a state of fitra, and that fitra we all have. We all have a sense of fitra. Every parent wants to be a good parent. Every child wants to be a good child. Neither wake up in the morning want to make the other's life hell. So we really need to appreciate that we're all coming from a place of goodness. So it's the husn dhan we need to have about for the other, that believing in the better side of the other person is so important. So when a child comes, when they've done something good, celebrate it to a degree that they are overwhelmed by your joy. And when they've done something bad, try to ignore it. Yes, it's done, but you know what? Tomorrow is another day. We have tomorrow to improve ourselves. We have tomorrow to build on our goodness that we've had the day before, possibly. So this hadith really highlights the need to have the good opinion of the other person, and to believe in the other person, and to be able to also recognize the positive that our children are trying so hard to establish in their life. I just want to say one last thing with this is that when it comes to our relationship, when we pick faults with our children, they just repeat that with us. It's reflected in their mannerisms with us, because when you look at a child between 7 and 14, they are looking to see how much you are honest to yourself. So how much do you live up to your own image of this good person that you're wanting them to be? So they will also look at you and say, well, you didn't pray on time. Why are you asking me to pray on time? Well, you didn't speak nicely to your mom, and now you're picking on me for not speaking nicely to my mom. So again, there's this alignment where we pulled up by our children, and that's part of our training. So in those moments, it's up to us to say, you know what, I hold my hands up. Yes, thank you. I really appreciate you being able to point that out to me, and I will try to do better. So this partnership, relationship, collaborative relationship with our children really needs to mold. So in order to do that, I just wanted to end by saying that be conscious of the role model that you are to your child. Secondly, be very aware of the instructions you're giving your child. Are they clear? Are they honest? Are they something that you're doing yourself? So clear instructions. Third is give them positive attention, just as is mentioned in this hadith. Give them positive attention, revel in the positive, celebrate the positive. And fourthly, be willing to praise your children for the mundane, everyday good things that your children are doing. It doesn't matter if that's an average expectation of a good child. They have chosen to be good. It's a choice that they've made, and we need to honor them and bless them and congratulate them for having made that choice. So again, repeating the role model that you are, the type of instructions you're giving your children. Third is the type of attention you're giving. So try to up the positive attention. And lastly, learn to praise your children, and meaningful praise. Make sure that the praise is meaningful. It's not stale praise. It's there and then, so the child knows that you've appreciated what's happened, and it's fresh, and it's worth celebrating. So I just wanted to end with that, today's presentation. And if there's any questions, inshallah, I'm more than happy to take questions. And if I've said anything that you think is incorrect, please correct me. And if you want to add anything to it as well, I'm more than welcome, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Ruby, for that insight into parenting. There's one question on the chat there. How do you get your children to do it for themselves?
So I'm assuming these are things that children are supposed to do for themselves, like putting their clothes away, toys away, tidying up after themselves, studying, basically having a routine, yes, regulating their own routine. Now, again, that's a topic again for another discussion, but in a way, you have to also observe yourself. How much have you been doing for them, or in terms of their deen? So you have to understand that just observe. What I always say to parents is, have a couple of weeks where you just observe yourself and your child. Who's doing what, who's saying what, when is it happening, what happened before and what happened after a particular incident. You will start to see a pattern. And majority of the time when it comes to deen, it's because of the nagging, it's the constant reminders. After a certain age, like in that hadith, all you can do is remind your child, give them the space, give them the benefit of the doubt, and see how it goes. If they still refuse to do it, it still has to be done through love. A harshness really doesn't work, regardless of whether it's for deen or anything else, but more so with the deen. Please be conscious of the compassion you show for your child, but at the same time hold on to the deen. You know, at Fajr you will wake them up, but you can do that through love, and you know, that collaborative relationship that I talked about, how you coach them to go to sleep the night before, how you make that Fajr a really lovely experience for them. So again, when it comes to deen, I really do believe it has to be done through a lot of compassion, and a relationship. So whenever parents bring a problem to me, I say, what is your relationship like? And most importantly, what's the relationship like between the parents? That has a huge impact on the way the children actually deal with certain problems.
Jazakallah khair. Just while we're waiting, perhaps for one or two more questions, I had a question myself. I love the concept that you mentioned, that we are raising the parents of tomorrow. In terms of connecting children with family, how do you manage relatives whose value system we don't agree with?
And I mean, mashallah, this question comes up quite a lot. So I mean, I don't know if many people will appreciate my view, but you know, our extended family is a microcosm of the bigger society that our children will go into, and it's a training ground for our children to be able to navigate different relationships. So when it comes to the extended family, and sometimes it's very close family as well, you might have somebody who smokes, you might have somebody who has fallen through the net and is out, you know, is really not seen to be productive as we would like them to be in society. And your children, for whatever reason, are drawn to these particular individuals, and they want to spend more time with them. How you navigate that relationship is being able to separate the person from their action, and and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does that with us, this sense of unconditional love. So the love for that human being, because your child is in a state of fitra, they're drawn to things that are good as well. They don't seeing the chaos that you see, they're not seeing the problems that you probably see. It's for the adult eye often. So with children, what they're attracted to is this, they're drawn to is a particular relationship where that person's quite kind. Maybe they find them interesting, they draw the curiosity of the child. So being able to separate the person from the action is being able to say, that person is a wonderful person, I'm sure Allah loves them, I'm sure you know, they're a good person at heart, but actually it's their behavior, some of their actions that I don't approve of. Is something that we don't do in our family, is something that we don't want you to do as well. So you're not bunging the person with all their actions as well and labeling them as one bad person. So it's being able to separate the person from the action, and that really helps resolve a lot of conflict in society, because each individual, even a homeless person, a drug addict, and internally they want to be better, they want to come out of this situation. So somewhere within that person there is goodness, And it's up to us as adults to be able to say that person is a good person, but their behavior, as for whatever reason they're behaving the way they are, is not something that we want to take up in our own behavior. So, you know, I don't know if that helps, but saying to the child, yes, that person is a wonderful person. What is it that you like about them? Try to understand from the child, what is it that they like about that person? And if it's good, great. If it's something bad, then it's up to you to educate your child around what is bad rather than focusing on that person. So if you're smoking, let's look into smoking, why smoking is bad. Not that that person is a bad person and we're labeling the smoking with that person, but we try to educate our children around certain issues away from that individual.
Jazakallah khair. A couple more questions coming through now. So the first one is, does the collaborative relationship also mean taking part in all their interests, obviously with the child? If they like computer games, we play the games with them, etc.
Yes, I believe it's really important for parents to be at the level of their child. Not that we're going to go to the level of games that they play, but taking an interest in what they're doing, and it's genuine interest. It's not to find out who's on the game, and it's not investigation, an opportunity to investigate what they're doing, but actually to take genuine interest in what they're playing. And you know, you might enjoy some of the stuff that they do because you're expecting them to do so much of what you're doing, to be grown up, to be an adult, to be sensible, to be clean, to be, there's so many things you're asking them to do, but we actually don't know the world that they going into, because when you start to go down to their level and build that trust, they will then start to share things with you, which will open up doors for conversations where you can insert values, where you can discuss attitudes, worldviews, and it's so important we do that as long as it is decent. And I'm assuming all our children are, you know, playing games and doing things that are, alhamdulillah, hopefully, inshallah, on a level of decency. So if they are, however, doing things that are not appropriate, it's important for you to say that you don't like what they're doing, but they still need to feel loved. Just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes us feel loved, but corrects our actions. So when you, at no point in time should a child feel rejected. Never should a child feel that they are not worthy of being part of a family. And because slowly they'll start to distance themselves from that relationship and find other circles where they will be worthy, and they might always not be appropriate.
Jazakallah khair. Another question here. Do you see a place in raising children through controlled raised voice reminders for controlling boundaries?
I need a bit of explanation on that. What's controlled raised voice?
I'm guessing shouting.
That's not controlled. For the child doesn't know that's controlled. They'll just hear the noise. So what we can manage is to train ourselves to be calm. So if you need to speak to your child and they're upstairs, it's worth climbing those stairs and knocking on the door and having a chat than to scream from downstairs. It will save you many hours down the line. So it's worth climbing those stairs. It's good for your health, but it's also good for the communication, because so many things get lost in that distance between you and the child upstairs or in the other room, or that you're looking down on the child and the 3-year-old is looking up at you and you're shouting at them. It's a power play. I mean, as soon as you start to raise your voice, it's an indication that you've lost control of your ability to control your anger. So shouting is a depiction of that, manifestation of that. So again, it speaks more about you, and what it does do is create fear in the child and a disconnect in the child, because they really don't know what's coming next. Alongside the pain, obviously, they feel hurt, and those of us who have been raised possibly in homes where there was a lot of shouting or smacking, we may have come to a place where we've forgiven our parents, but actually the pain hasn't gone. So our inner child hasn't really healed. So the raised voices, smacking and shouting really isn't appropriate. And it's not the Sunnah. Prophet ﷺ, Anas radiallahu anhu, when he was sent on an errand and he went, and Prophet ﷺ found him playing with the children, he had every right to shout at Anas, but he didn't. He went and joined in. He was playful, which actually encouraged Anas radiallahu anhu to be regretful, to be able to say sorry. So when we push our children against the wall, they become defensive. What we need to do is this idea of collaboration is that bring them onto the same platform and say that, yeah, I just want to understand you better. What happened? What is going on? Rather than saying to them everything you feel and they don't have any room to express what they're feeling, because you've already said you've set the environment, which is often negative.
Exactly. Got a couple more questions, but we'll have to sort of wrap up shortly, but see if we can rattle through them. How could a parent support their child in the way you have said if the other parent doesn't necessarily understand this and has many perhaps traditional parenting traits?
Yeah, so this is parental conflict, and children are quite resilient in knowing, as again, it's connected to their fitra, knowing which parent is really trying to set them good boundaries and to set them to instill good habits in them. They may rebel, and it's really important when parents are in conflict. I mean, I was doing a session earlier today. When parents are in conflict, it's so important that you don't play that out in front of the child. But also, if it happens, if you're the parent that feels that you understand the child better, it's up to you to explain to that child in an age-appropriate way that there was a problem. And we are trying to deal with it as adults, but it has nothing to do with you. We both still love you very much as a child, but it's just something, there was a disagreement between us as adults. How you do that to your child is a language that you need to choose that is age-appropriate, appropriate to their level of understanding. But they need a reasonable explanation of why that's happened. The other thing about parents in conflict is that, we all have a choice. Now, you really, and it depends on the level of conflict there is between parents, you have that choice. And many parents decide to stay in that relationship because for the children. But actually in the long run, in the long term, it doesn't do any service to the child. And I'm not advocating separation. I'm not advocating that route. What I'm saying is that each parent has to make a real decision about how much they can flex in that relationship. And if it isn't helping the child, you have to think, how am I going to remedy this? So either that, you have to convince your partner, your husband, your wife to seek that support, to understand things better, to have intervention, to get some support in that. If not, you have to maintain that relationship with your child, where it's really important where you don't rationalize the partner's behavior, the spouse's behavior. You don't say, well, darling, you need to behave a bit better. You need to stay a bit better, otherwise daddy will get angry. Or you need to do this, otherwise mommy will smack you, or whatever it is. Don't rationalize behavior to the child. What you need to say to the child is, that behavior wasn't appropriate. What is it that you would like me to do? What do you think we can do to help better manage the situation moving forward? So that this is where you need to help the child understand that in society, to live a life as a future parent, I don't want you to start behaving like that, because that isn't the norm. That isn't appropriate behavior. But also in minor conflict, and I just want to mention this as well, that don't expect your spouse to parent like you. It's not going to happen. So we each bring our own journeys into this parenting, and allow your spouse to parent unless there's safeguarding issues. Allow your parent, the other parent, to parent in the way they think is fit, and in private try to discuss, is it in the best interest of our child? but we will each come in at a different angle in our parenting. And children are quite resilient. They as long as there's no safeguarding issues, they actually grow within that, because they learn to problem solve, as long as the parents are not at each other's throat and making each other's lives very difficult. So we'll always have differences. It's how you manage them in your relationship. I mean, I'm really conscious. I'm giving very short answers to very long questions and deep questions. Please forgive me, but this just simplify as much as I can.
Jazakallah khair. There's actually 2 or 3 questions still left, Mahera, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and sort of wrap that up in one last question to see if that can sort of summarize it. But do you agree that a community raises a child?
Absolutely. It takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes the London city. We can create villages or cities where our children need to be raised within a community. So we all need circles of support. There's no way 2 parents in the most wonderful relationship they could have raise a child by themselves. That child will not be socially equipped. So we need a society, we need a community to raise a child, and which means that if I want to raise my child well, I need to take care of my neighbor's children as well. So if I'm having difficulty with my child, focus on looking after somebody else's child and being a mentor to somebody else's child. And naturally, your child will start to respect you because they see what a wonderful job you're doing with the other child. And also it gives you the headspace to think about your child in a different way. You're not in their face all the time. And just to share a very personal experience that in raising my own children, I remember when I became consumed by wanting to raise my children in a particular way, it was just overwhelming. But however, when I started to become more involved in the community, started to go to dawah circles, started to take circles, started to actually invest time in my community, and my children were tagging along with me to those things, events and circles and events and programs, they naturally learnt from the community. They learnt because those circles are made up of particular people who also want to see change. So my children were learning through that experience without me being in their face, in their lives in such an intense way. So I think it is important that we really need to look after the community that we're raising our children in order to create a space that is safe and that is healing as well for the children that are being raised in that community. So I absolutely agree. You do need a community to raise a child.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Ruby. I'm afraid we're out of time now. Again, it's been a fantastic session, some really informative discussion there. Personally speaking, I think we could have you on every evening and it still wouldn't be enough. But for those participants listening, Dr. Ruby does run courses at the Al-Emaan Centre. So after Ramadan, inshallah, do look out for those courses. So Dr. Ruby, Jazakallah khair again. Could I ask you to finish with a short dua?
Yes, and I just want to ask for forgiveness if I've said anything wrong, and may Allah forgive me and seek your forgiveness. So subhanaka Allahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal 'asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilu salihat wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr. Jazakallah khair, and please keep me and my family in your du'as. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Ruby, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. For everyone keen to hang on for Sheikh Mudaffar Nouri's recitation, do stay on the line and Sheikh will be with us shortly, inshallah.